Welcome to the 100X Life podcast, where we activate people who desire to live the words of Jesus and experience the abundant life he promises. I'm your host, Rob Dayton, and I hope this podcast inspires you to put in the work of following Jesus.
Now the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, to bind up the brokenhearted and set the captives free.
Welcome back to 100X Life Challenge. Thank you for joining us today. I've got a dear friend, Andrew Winnett. Andrew Winnett is with us to talk about the Word. We're on day 13. Can't believe we're on day 13. And we're doing Word of Jesus number 7, Take Up Your Cross. This one is probably going to be challenging for all of us. And I'm excited about this conversation, Andrew, because Take Up Your Cross is kind of a religious thing. Obviously, the cross is one of the strongest or most recognizable religious icons on the planet. And so when Jesus is saying, take up your cross, you know, obviously America doesn't have a place to do that physically. We don't have a bunch of people getting on crosses. So Jesus is thinking of something else. And this is kind of cool because this conversation will really take us to what does it mean to follow him when he's actually here, and the disciples got to actually physically follow him versus following him now, which is in more of a spiritual sense. But before we get into it, Andrew, tell me about yourself. What do you do? Your family? What's going on in your world?
Sure. So great to be with you, Rob. So I'm a father of 4. I've been married for 16 years, got married at 19, and live in Franklin, Tennessee. I own a financial services company called Retirement Renegade. I've been a Christian since I was 14. Had a little juvenile hall experience that really kind of shook me and kind of got me on the right track. And I was kind of a rebel for Jesus after that. And so, yeah, it's been a wild ride. We've had lots of ups and downs. I'm obviously an entrepreneur and had more downs than ups. We're on definitely an upside now. We're doing very well, but a lot of years. Broke as a joke, ready to choke. And I'm really grateful to be on this side, doing very well. And so it's just been a wild ride, a wild journey. And we'll talk about just the ups and the downs of, being a Christian and what that looks like.
That's really crazy. Andrew and I, just so happens we were just in Texas hunting. Andrew's a consummate hunter. He loves it. I would never go with him necessarily, but my son, Jed, I asked him, what do you want to do, really want to do? I want to go hunting. So I called Andrew because he knows what to do. And we were in Texas hunting. Really, really cool experience. But in the airport, as we were coming back, we were talking about you, and Jed was talking about your success. And one of the things I pointed out is, well, that came with a lot of failure. He's failed a lot and failed fast. And that is instrumental to where you are now. Say a little bit about that, because that really applies spiritually. A lot of times we think that our failure, even in a sin situation, cannot be redeemed, so to speak, or leveraged by God in the kingdom. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I think it comes down to knowing what you're called to do, because if you don't know what you're called to do, you don't know what your purpose, for being here, you don't know what your assignment is. During that contradiction, which we all are going to have, and that is really what the cross is the contradiction, you will give up, you'll give in, and you won't make it through the cross, whatever that looks like. So for me, God called me in 2015. At this time, I had been involved in 13 different industries, not 13 different jobs, 13 separate industries. So we're talking like construction, plumbing delivery, coffee franchises, ministry, rattlesnake removal business, fast food. I've done everything, dude. I've done banking. you name it, 13 different industries until I found the 14th. And really God spoke to me in 2015 that this was going to be my assignment. And once I got a hold of that, we really started to flourish and thrive. And then we had a very, very great contradiction. I mean, we went from in talks with an NFL Hall of Famer selling 5% of our company for $1 million, so basically a $20 million valuation, to losing everything and having to, being sued, a massive amount of debt, tempted to file for bankruptcy, but I would have had to get out of the industry that I felt like God called me to. And it's just been a wild journey. And so persevering through that contradiction and that valley experience allowed me to have the wisdom on the other side. And now we're on the other side. We're making more money than we've ever made. We're helping more people. I've got 6 radio shows. I've produced 3 Hollywood films. I've written 4 books. It's just unbelievable. And that's happened really fast. So, it's just really cool to see how God, if you'll persevere through that contradiction, what is on the other side of the cross, whatever that cross looks like for you. I mean, it's really, as believers, it's really easy to, in a moment, die for your faith, right? I mean, that's actually, I think that, I've had a few experiences in my life where really big platform, really big, a situation, and God fills my mouth. I can feel the supernatural. Like, you just rise to the level. That's why Jesus said, hey, don't worry about what you're going to say during that super critical moment, because I will give you the words. I will give you the grace. You saw it with Stephen, right? When he's being martyred, the first martyr there in the book of Acts, he had that same kind of grace that Jesus had.
And we know what that feels like when that's happening.
Yeah. So it's easy to be like that, like one last hurrah before you die, putting a stake in the ground. That's pretty easy to do if you have any level of faith, but it's way harder to actually live day by day. Picking up your quote unquote cross, what does that look like? We'll talk about that, but what does that look like? Living it out and understanding, where are you in the sequence of things? Are you before the cross? Are you in the cross moment of the contradiction, or are you after the cross? And I think that's much harder for folks to realize, understand, and actually do well.
That's really cool. And we're trying to train ourselves as Jesus followers to lean into the contradiction, just to frame it a little bit more based on the parable of the sower. The contradiction actually comes on account of the word being released to you, giving you that opportunity to resist, to get in a gym, as we've been calling it. And that contradiction and doing that repeatedly, as you're talking about, is kind of the path. Do you feel like as you've gone through that contradiction time and time again, do you feel like now you're beginning to see that the contradiction is the path, that it's actually the one you want to run into? Do you see any of that?
Yeah. And there's, it says in Romans 10:17, faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. When there's a level of understanding that it's not just Jesus who endured these types of situations, it's actually many of our heroes of the faith. It makes it a lot clearer, because, so just for example, if you'll give me just a couple moments, if you think about, why did Jesus come to earth, right? It says in 1 John 3, that Jesus was manifested to destroy the works of the devil, right? That was his purpose, or his assignment, destroy the works of the devil. Now, the fulfillment of that was the cross. A perfect man had to die on our behalf to truly and ultimately destroy the works of the devil. So Jesus' assignment was to die on the cross as a perfect man to redeem all people, right? To make a way of salvation for all. That was his purpose and his assignment. But there was a huge contradiction, because everybody thought that he was going to, again, going to the context of the time, that Rome, they had their foot on, the Jews' neck, and that he was going to somehow defeat the Romans, and that was the way, right? So him dying, it literally said, like, everybody lost heart, essentially. They forgot all the words. They forgot all the miracles. They forgot all of it.
Everything.
They forgot everything. And it wasn't until he came back, the fulfillment of going through the cross, that they remembered his words. They remembered what he said. They remembered the prophecies. All of it made sense on the other side. But during it, they thought all hope was lost. They were going back to their old ways, you know? Oh, let's go fishing, right? Peter said. So it just, if you understand Jesus's purpose was to destroy the works of the devil, and that not everybody's purpose, not everybody's assignment is the same. In fact, they're all pretty much different.
Wow.
There's always going to be a contradiction. You know, like if you go through the heroes just quickly, like Abraham, right? What is the promise that God gave Abraham? You're going to have so many descendants, right? I'm going to bless you, make your name great, and make you a great nation. There's going to be more descendants than the stars in the sky, the sand in the sea. And what was the contradiction? Well, the contradiction was time. It took 25 freaking years, you know?
And Jesus, or God, is asking him to sacrifice the only true vehicle of that descendancy.
That's right. That's right. That was a contradiction. Same thing with David. You know, David said, your house and your kingdom will endure forever. Before me, your throne's going to be established forever. But what was his contradiction? Well, there's two. There was Bathsheba. He blew it there. And then, and Absalom, right? His son was trying to take over the kingdom. That was a big contradiction that he had to persevere through. Joseph, obviously the dreams, you know, nations would bow down to him, including his family. What was his contradiction? His brothers threw him in a pit, sold him to slavery, falsely accused, in prison for years. You know, you look at Peter. Peter said, or Jesus said to Peter that in the book of Acts, that I'm going to use you to lead the Jews to salvation. And he's like the worst person, you know, for the Jews, because he's like basically a garbage truck driver. I mean, a fisherman at the time was like the lowest position you could have. And his contradiction was he struggled with fear of the Jews. I mean, it says in the book of Acts, he got rebuked because he cared what people thought about him. You know, Paul, which was the perfect example of how he should have been the guy that was best poised to
For
bring
the Jews.
Yeah. He knew that world. He was a scholar, and God used him. The contradiction was he's going to use him to lead the Gentiles to salvation, right? And his contradiction was really persecution. And some people are going to have that. Some people are going to be called to die and be persecuted, but others won't. Solomon, you know, he was called to lead God's people well after David's successful reign, but his contradiction was his mother, number one, the reputation there, and he was young. Thank God he had enough wisdom to ask for wisdom, right? So, you know, there's that old saying, you know, for those who personally develop ourselves, everything that you desire is on the other side of fear. But the Christian version of that, the other side of the coin, is everything that you were designed for lives on the other side of the cross or the contradiction.
Wow.
And so, anyway,
I love that, because let's talk about that a little bit deeper, or just kind of the talking about that first entrance you had, which is different from the book. In the book, my commentary on the words of Jesus is very small. It's only 4 paragraphs generally, but I was asking the reader to think of the torture device, the crucifixion torture device, as a pathway to salvation.
yeah,
And that's kind of the good side of it. And what you're saying is kind of the other side of it. It is that torture device was the pathway to defeating the enemy.
right.
That was what it was. And, you know, you're talking about Jesus's purpose was to defeat the works of the enemy. And I would argue, in the purpose you're talking about for each of us, defeating the works of the enemy is included. It's like, because we are his kids, we are his followers, our purpose coincides. We are also defeating the enemy. So I like that, because now we can think about take up your cross as an offensive. strategy against the enemy. In other words, when I go through this process and I go through this contradiction, although I can't see it now, and the people around me won't be able to see it, much like your point about the disciples, on the other side of it, they will see the glory, they will see the wisdom, and they will see the destruction of the enemy. What's cool about that too is the disciples' eyes were kind of closed to that until that moment of endurance. And I bet you that's similar to other people may not understand why we're moving through the contradiction, why we're believing in the face of complete opposite coming at us. But then their eyes can also be opened after we've been through that and we actually have a testimony to tell.
Yeah.
Then their eyes can also be open. Pretty cool. When Andrew, when you talk about that as a in terms of purpose and going through a contradiction, what do you feel like it was for your life in terms of was it that one example where you were called into wealth management and then kind of lost everything at that point, decided not to file for bankruptcy, or is there more?
Well, great question. So I think there's 3 things that happen before the cross and 3 things that happen after. And, the Bible says we're not supposed to be unaware of the devil's schemes, right? So and again, I'm going to give some examples, then I'm going to tell you what happened in my life because we all have a story, but it's crazy because the word gives us example after example after example. And if we can look at the Bible through the framework, all of a sudden we start seeing, hey, Jesus was not the only person who we're so familiar with the story that we miss that, hey, all these other guys had similar things. There's a pattern here. There's a pattern in their lives. There's a pattern in our life. And if we understand the pattern, we're not surprised because it's the surprise that's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. Like I'm going to have to go through this. I'm going to have to do this
Is the surprise is that the thing that brings the fear?
Yes. Fear of the unknown. Right. So for example, there's 3 things that happen before the cross. Number 1 is obviously temptation. Jesus, he was tempted, led in the wilderness, tempted for 40 days. We all know the story, right? Peter was tempted to deny him and he did. Gehazi, right? The guy, Elijah's, secondhand man, who was tempted to take money from Naaman, right? Job, curse God and die, right? He lost all his children, lost all of his stuff. Abraham, go take Hagar. Joseph was tempted with Potiphar's wife. There's going to be temptation. Maybe it's a temptation to quit, right? I was tempted to quit before the breakthrough, before the resurrection. I was tempted to give up. Oh my gosh, I'm this much in debt. I got sued. I lost everything I had. Maybe I should just call it a day and get into another industry. But Lord, you said, you gave me this prophetic word. And if I file for bankruptcy, I can't be in the financial industry. So what the heck, Lord? And I remember just being honest, being vulnerable. There was a season where I would do these pray days, and once a week I would just go out in the woods and I would smoke cigarettes and I would just cry and,
Wow.
and being vulnerable because I was at my lowest point. And I was just like, Lord, what the heck? We went from 0 to hero to 0 again. We went from having this enormous, unbelievable miracle signs and wonders, people getting saved, people having dreams about this business, prophetic words being fulfilled. It was unbelievable to losing it all. And I had no idea why. I couldn't.
And so let's build that because that's like so real. You've got this word, this prophetic word about actually moving into that calling.
Yep.
And then you have other people who are speaking into it as the tide is rising, and it's very evident that God is. You could really easily say, well, God is on the move. Look at how blessed I'm becoming. Wow,
Yep.
This word was really, really, really true. And then crash.
Yeah.
I mean, that is frightening. That is a place where you're confronting fear face on. and so you had a real choice.
Yeah.
You had a real choice.
Well, here's the thing. I would not have made it if it was not for that prophetic word that God gave me. And this is one thing I'll say about prophetic words. Prophetic words only confirm, they never lead. Unless you get it, right? So if you get a prophetic word from someone else, it should only confirm what the Lord's already telling you. Well, I don't know what the Lord's telling me. Well, get alone. Get alone in the secret place. Get alone in the woods. Do whatever, right? And go talk to him. Be still, be quiet, because he will speak. He will be found by you if you search for him with all your heart, the Bible says. So you have to get your own word. Now, it's crazy. This is one of my favorite verses. Paul's talking to Timothy. He says, I commit to you, son Timothy, I charge you according to the prophecies previously made concerning you, that by them you wage the good warfare. You're going to go through warfare. That there will be temptation. If you do not have a prophetic word, it says in the following verse, having faith and a good conscience, which some having rejected concerning the faith have suffered shipwreck. If you want your life to be a constant shipwreck, don't fight with prophetic words. It's the prophetic words that keeps you from the shipwreck. And again, before the cross, there's three things. The first one is temptation. I had to overcome wanting to give up and file bankruptcy. Just cut my losses, start over in a different industry, but I'd be disobeying that prophetic word. That prophetic word was the only thing that kept me tethered to not quitting.
So we should attach that to this process, because I think that is so helpful, Andrew, that you're bringing us a real world example of something that God told us, and then told you specifically, and then said, hey, you've got to walk through this. You've got to believe me in the face of the opposite. And let me connect that to 100X Life, because in 100X Life, we're saying the same thing, but we're focused on the 55 things that we all have to do to demonstrate love to the world. So we're focused on that, but then you also have, the rest of the Word of God. And then individually, we're all hearing from God. Jesus said, my sheep hear my voice. So if you're calling yourself his sheep, but you have the right to hear his voice and be taught directly by him. Jesus said, Holy Spirit will teach you all things. That's pretty comprehensive. Right. So you're talking about an individual word. So in 100X Life, we're talking about the logos, the written word of Jesus. He says, live these commands of mine. And then when you're taking it to the next level, or maybe two levels up, we also have to believe what he's saying for us.
That is right. Yeah. And that comes down to the second thing that happens before the cross, which is time, right? There is a time element to this, and boy, we don't like that. We're impatient. Abraham,
it feels like too much time.
Yeah. Well, that's not how God works. It took Abraham 25 years to get his boy. It took Joseph 2 years just in prison alone, let alone the other difficulties he went through. David, his promise wasn't even going to be established in his own lifetime. It was going to happen through his son. Job, so this is interesting. From the time that his restoration happened, scholars on the low end say there was 42 months of his suffering. And there's other scholars that say it could have been as much as 60 years. Wow. And he never cursed God and never gave up on his nature. So there's a time element. Jesus had a time element too, right? It takes time to see God move.
I think what you're saying is, when we get the contradiction, we have to have an awareness that God's timing, and this is my experience as well, his timing tends to be not in days, usually years and decades.
Yes.
Yeah, and so we might have to endure the contradiction, and we like to say in 100X Life, we let endurance, this is James, let endurance have its perfect work. In other words, that endurance and the time that you're now calling attention to, get us in the gym for consistent belief in the face of the contradiction, which is going to make us stronger. And I would argue, for the moment, we're totally blessed.
Yes, that's right. And then there's one other aspect that I think it happened in my life, and as I look through the Bible, it happened in theirs too, is not only is there a temptation element before the cross, not only is there a time element before the cross, but there's also a tribulation element, which kind of goes to the book of James. But like you think about Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, what was their tribulation? Well, number one, they got their balls cut off, right? Because not to be crass, but hey, it's in there. They made them eunuchs. But, you think about, Jesus, obviously he was, there was tribulation. Paul, all of them dealt with tribulation. In my own life, for me in the business world, I went from building all these people, all these advisors, these agents, to having them poached away. I had to buy out my business partners at a premium that I couldn't afford to pay. I got sued from a competitor, and I went from making a lot of money to a very little amount of money, selling final expense, which if anybody knows the insurance world, that was the only thing I could fall back on just to make ends meet. I went from doing super well to just duking it out with the poor, trying to sell them these little insurance policies. It was very, very difficult. And I think that if we're aware of this, that there's this pattern, there's before the cross happens. Now, it's after the cross is the fun part, and we'll talk about that. That's the yay, we made it, right? But you have got to be aware, going back to the seeds, right? The parable of the sower. If you don't understand temptation, if you don't understand there's a time element and that there's a tribulation element, you will give up. And you cannot give up because you're so close, right? And so for me in my own life, I wanted to file bankruptcy so bad and just cut my losses. I wouldn't have been able to pay my business partners. And I said, hey guys, I filed for bankruptcy. It's tough luck. And get out of the industry. And you know what? I may have made money, but I wouldn't have done my assignment. And I'm really grateful that I never quit. Didn't quit.
That's so cool. And so that third one, you're gonna face trial or tribulation.
Yeah,
that reminds me of Jesus in the upper room, talking to the disciples at the end of John 16. I have told you these things, though, that in me you will have peace. Mm-hmm. In this world you will have trouble.
Yep.
But take heart, I have overcome the world. So he's telling them all these things about, the time, the endurance, the things that he's doing, so that they understand, hey, I'm not taking you out of trouble.
Yeah.
Like Jesus' prayers, I pray that you would not take them out of the world, but you would have them endure. You would have them experience peace, knowing that Jesus has overcome the world. Jesus has overcome all these things that we're doing. It's interesting to me because we're actually fight from victory. It's not like we're fighting a battle to win.
Yeah, right.
We're not fighting to win. Jesus already won. Our fight is from victory. We just get to play with the toys of victory, and in this fear, which becomes real. It was certainly real for you. It is kind of a shadow of what really is there when we press in, when we endure. When that trouble comes, we see it as a gym. You reference back to James again. Wow, that is so cool. So, is there another place within your life where you feel like, give us another practical example where this is just happening, maybe in less of a huge time, but maybe like on a daily experience, you might have to do something like this.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm in sales, so I mean, we have big bills, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. And we have, we obviously have very big revenue too, but, just trusting, not to kick a dead horse here, but everything that I do, to quote Miles Monroe, if there's a contradiction but you're in the center of God's will, it's really the safest place to be.
Come on.
And you can, as Miles says, you can put God over a barrel. Saying, hey, God, you called me to this. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm being obedient. I'm persevering. I'm doing the right thing. I'm serving your children. I'm, obsessing about their problems, trying to serve them at the highest level. I need you to come through this month, right? Hey, it's been a little, you have seasons of abundance. You have seasons of famine. We're in kind of a season of famine that happens in business. I need you to show up. And he always does. I've never missed a payroll. I've never missed, paying, we've always done, when you're just in the center of God's will, things click. There's always going to be difficulty. Don't get me wrong. But here's just quickly, if you're open, 3 things that happen after the cross.
Okay. Tell us.
The first one is miracles. Miracles follow. So, for example, you look at Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. After the cross moment, when they persevered, there was the fire. God showed up literally. We all know the story. And then Daniel shut the mouths of miracles, right? Miracles followed. Joseph, the interpretation of the prophetic dreams. The stone was rolled away. The dead got up and walked around Jerusalem. His breakthrough became breakthrough on a multiplied level. Peter and Paul, the authority over sickness and demonic possession. In my life, we've seen miracles in finances. We've seen miracles in healing. We've seen miracles we've seen non-believers. We train them how to take care of the financial side, but also whether they become a client or not, pray for people. And we were seeing healings from non-believers praying for them.
Come on.
And on video, we're talking across the country. So the first thing that happens,
that'll make you a believer real quick.
Exactly. The first thing that happens is miracles begin to follow. And there's just momentum. There's so much momentum, which is super cool. The second thing that happens after the cross is promotion. Promotion follows. So, again, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they all got promoted, right? Over multiple administrations. Solomon established the first sheep nation. Job, God gave him double of everything he lost. For me, in my life, on the other side of that contradiction or that cross, I've had promotion. I've had great promotion, produced multiple films, written all these books, radio shows. We just raised $500,000 for A21 to end human trafficking. We put on this big gala event. We had all these big hitters.
That was the master's program Kingdom assignment. We haven't told our listeners, but you are also in the master's program. That was your Kingdom assignment, right?
That's right. And we raised over $500,000 to put an end to human sex trafficking. And so the second thing that happens is promotion. And then the third thing that happens is fulfillment, which is what we're all after. Joseph, I love this because Joseph, he named his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And it literally means God has made me forget my hardships and God has made me fruitful.
Wow.
You look at Jesus's life, he made a way of salvation for all people. He fulfilled his purpose, his assignment. Jacob, God gave him and his descendants the promised land. Same thing with Moses. Even though Moses never got to see it in his earthly life, Matthew 17, the transfiguration on the mount, who was there? Elijah and Moses. So God fulfilled it as well. And that's the beautiful part, is that when you persevere past that cross, the contradiction, on the other side is everything we're after. It's promotion, it's fulfillment, it's miracles. And that's what we all want.
That's good. Okay, so just do the flyover of the 6, the 3 before the cross and the 3 after.
So before the cross, you're going to experience temptation. There's going to be a time element, and there's going to be tribulation.
Okay.
After the cross, there's going to be miracles, there's going to be promotion, and there's going to be fulfillment.
Okay. So that's a beautiful rubric of the cross and what to expect before and after. And what we're after is, hey man, you're living in America doing our thing. Like, what is the cross?
Yeah.
You're talking about in your calling. Let's take it to people, because, that process that you just described has to work out with people too. And what I'm thinking of is, I have a friend who, has has a wife that is an alcoholic, plain and simple, an alcoholic. Yeah. And it doesn't look like it's getting better. It looks like it's getting worse. Mm-hmm. And, in that situation, I think if we were going to justify ourselves and be pharisaical about it, you might say, well, maybe he should just leave her. But I would propose, as the imagery in Paul suggests, and this is in, I think it's Ephesians 22, is that we are to actually take up our cross for our spouse.
Yeah.
So walk us through the 6 things and what that might look like for that gentleman in the endurance part, because obviously he's experiencing tribulation. What else? How does that work as a person?
Well, so let's talk through this. Again, practical, this is great. So before the cross, right? So in that example, the temptation, the first thing you're going to deal with, temptation is to give up on her.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have time for this. I'll listen to all these pastors who give many different reasons through skewed and perverted interpretation of the scriptures on why this is legal to divorce her.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Wrong. That is wrong. The temptation is to give up on her. Did Jesus give up on you? No. And we're supposed to do greater things than he did. As the Father has sent me, I've sent you. So if Jesus didn't give up on us, then why are we giving up on her? So the first thing is the temptation, knowing what the temptation will be, so you're aware of it. We're not supposed to be unaware of the enemy's devices. So,
and you said that almost as an expectation.
That's right. And I know we talked about this a little bit on the elk hunt, but like where attention goes, intention follows. So if your attention is on why everything's wrong and why she can't get it together, right? Your intention is going to...
If that's what you're focused on.
That's right. That's right. So in that situation, hey, the temptation is going to be to give up on her. The second thing is before the cross, there's going to be a time element. It's not going to happen overnight, typically. And
we want it to. Like, we want alcoholism solved in let's say 3 months.
And it may take longer than that.
Might take a decade.
That's why it says in 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient.
Come on.
You got to be patient. If you love her, you'll be patient with her. And then thirdly, there's going to be tribulation. It's going to be ugly. It's not going to be fun, right? It may affect your reputation, which maybe you're trying to guard, right? But the point is that, hey, this is the person that you covenanted with, kind of like how Jesus covenanted with you unconditionally.
With us.
That's what I mean. That, like Jesus, if I was talking to this guy, Jesus covenanted with you unconditionally. Why don't you covenant with her unconditionally? I mean, you look at, was it Hosea and Gomer? That story in the Old Testament?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. Well, and I have feelings about that. This is going to be extremely controversial, so brace yourselves.
Yeah.
The one excuse that pastors would say that it's okay to end a relationship is adultery.
Yeah.
And in Matthew, we find Jesus' teaching on adultery, and he says it was not meant to be this from the beginning. What God has put together, let no man put asunder. And then he has a caveat, unless there's adultery. Mm-hmm. But what's really interesting to me is Mark has and by the way, Matthew's a Coptic of Mark. It's copying. Mark does not include that. Mm-hmm. Mark doesn't say, except in the case of adultery. You're talking about Gomer and, hey, marry this prostitute, which obviously for a woman committing adultery, that's pretty painful. But the fact that Mark doesn't include it, if Mark heard, or, Mark is writing for Peter, if Peter heard that was an out, he would have said it. He's a man. He would have said it.
Yeah.
And he didn't. So my belief, and again, this is the controversial part, is I don't think Jesus said that. I think that Mark is saying what was said, and it didn't include that, or else he would have had it in. I know it's controversial, but that's just what I think. Keep going.
Well, think about this. So just to kind of add, this is kind of the first thing that came in my head. If the marriage covenant is supposed to be an exact representation of the body and Jesus, Okay.
Which it is.
If we could lose our salvation, we would lose our salvation. Okay.
Right.
So
right.
if Jesus's covenant with us is unconditional, why wouldn't our relationship with our spouse be unconditional as well?
Come on.
There's not a asterisk by Jesus's marriage with his bride. Hey, you'll be saved, you'll be in union, you'll be in fellowship with me unless you do X, Y, and Z, right? There's no except for sexual morality.
Right.
But why are we saying that with our wives? I'll tell you what it does is it should make you really slow down and think about, for the next generation who's not married, you really got to be wise on who you pick.
Come on.
Because literally, if that is true, which I believe it is as well, you're not getting out of this. There is no divorce, period.
Yeah, and just a full disclaimer, when I wasn't walking with Jesus, I totally got a divorce.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I struggle the most in forgiving other men when they do get a divorce because I got one. So it's kind of like this self-condemning what I see other guys do. No, don't do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going through these 3 before the cross, and remind us again. What was the first one? I always forget the first one.
So the temptation,
and then we're going to have time.
Yep.
And then we're going to have tribulation.
Yep.
Okay, so tell us about what are the potential glory for this man on the other side of those 3 things. If he's able to endure those 3 things, what might happen to his spouse?
Well, number one, miracles are going to follow.
Come on.
So you're going to see, like, the first thing that came to my head was Elijah and Elisha, right? And how Elisha, he said, I want a double portion. I want a double portion from you, Elijah. I'm not letting you go up to heaven until you give me a double portion. Guess what? I don't remember the numbers, but Elijah had 11 or 12 different miracles recorded, and Elisha had exactly the double, except he was one short when he died. And it's like, it wasn't an exact double, right? Until someone was moving his bones, and his bone fell out of the casket or whatever, hit another dead person, and that dude raised up, and it fulfilled the promise. Miracles, right? So even if it doesn't seem like it's being fulfilled in your lifetime, miracles will follow.
It's amazing how, when we talk about miracles, because some listeners may be like, well, miracles, what are you talking about? And when people do that, I go, well, what Bible are you reading? Because the Bible I'm reading is pretty crazy whack filled with, there's a talking donkey.
Yeah.
Like, if we believe the word of God, then we need to believe that he's going to do it again, that there's going to be things that are miracles that happen.
These are the signs that will follow those who believe. They will, cast out demons, heal the sick, cleanse the leper, raise the dead.
So are you thinking, when you think of this particular situation we're talking about with, that maybe some kind of miracle would happen to her, or maybe even to him?
Listen, miracles can come in many shapes and sizes. Some of the miracle could be a change of heart, a grace for it. The miracle could be that her breakthrough becomes a breakthrough for countless others.
Wow.
Right? The miracle could be, oftentimes the enemy will attack you in an area that you think that you're weak in, but it's often an overextension of your greatest strength. Right? So if you're struggling with pornography as a man, that probably is, the enemy knows that actually is an overextension of your greatest strength, which is walking in purity, because the pure in heart will see God. And when you see God,
amen,
I'm like him, because you're made into his image. So whatever you're going through, right? So maybe alcohol for her is a way of escape, right? But what is she escaping from? She's escaping from pain. The miracle could be, once she gets healed and delivered from this pain, the supernatural wisdom to recognize, why are you medicating yourself with this alcohol, and unlocking people and delivering them from that pain supernaturally or naturally. right? God works supernaturally in natural ways too.
And use the pain that she has experienced to leverage and expand the kingdom in areas that will be a great testimony. It's almost like you know her.
I don't know. I don't know.
I know. It's almost like you know her
Yeah.
because I do.
Yeah.
And I see that already. Okay, so miracles, and then the next two.
Yeah, promotion. So obviously when she gets that, when she has the breakthrough, there will be promotion. You know, for me, I went to juvenile hall. I struggled with rage and anger, right? And I got in a big fight, and it landed me in juvenile hall. But guess what? I didn't give up there, right? I purposed to get, I needed work on myself. And now, not much gets me bothered. I've had great victory in that area.
That sounds like, we're going to talk about being slow to angry or don't be angry.
Yeah.
That sounds like it's a real evidence of you actually putting that word into practice through a transformed mind.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a whole other story.
It is. I mean, I wish we had like another. I'm going to have you back on. Okay. So, and then the third thing. So we got miracles, we got promotions,
and then we got fulfillment, because
wow,
he who has been forgiven much loves much. And when you understand that his love never wavered for you at that time, it's so fulfilling and satisfying, because you knew that, hey, this is where I was, but look at where he's taken me. And the contrast, diamonds, when they present diamonds, they present it with a backdrop of black velvet.
Wow.
Right? Because the contrast is what makes the diamond so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with going through that difficult season and being able to have victory over that difficult temptation and vice. You're going to have so much more fulfillment on the other side, especially as you see God multiply the fruit from that victory in other people's lives. It's just so fulfilling and so incredible.
Wow. And that's, and how might that manifest in this particular situation, would you imagine?
Well, like I said, when she has victory, she's going to have a heart for other people who are they're meditating with this alcohol, because there's pain. Typically there's some sort of pain.
And
right?
she'll be able to unlock that in other people faster. That's kind of similar to me in pornography and my sex addiction.
Yeah.
In my 20s. And, as I stand in the room in the master's program and talk about that, I'm unlocking the hearts of many men, because in terms of men's issues, that's a pretty big one.
Yes.
And that can take us away. Okay. That's amazing. I love your process, 3 steps before, 3 steps after. We've taken that and we've made that applicable to a situation, not just a calling, but to a person. We may also experience that, I'm sure you have, Andrew, where it's a friend. And I want to say, I want to be careful to say, particularly in marriage, that there could be a situation where, you do need to set some boundaries. It doesn't mean that you're not being honest in communication with the person who's struggling. And then also you might be in a situation where you're actually physically being abused. That's probably something you wouldn't want to stay in.
Yeah.
So I'm just careful to say that. But, and then also, we also have to follow what we believe God is telling us to do. One of the things I think that Jesus looked at Paul before he was a Christian and said, that's my man, because Paul's conviction led him to do crazy things.
Yeah.
Even though he was believing the wrong thing, he was believing it wholeheartedly.
Yes.
And Jesus is like, that's my guy. So sometimes we're in a situation where, we actually might not have it right, that's God's word, but then God honors that we believe and we take action on that.
Can I add to that real quick?
Please.
So one thing, and when like going to Paul, right? Paul was so resolute in his beliefs and his convictions, he was willing to kill people for it. But sometimes what God will do is he will do the exact opposite of what you think. Like Peter was open in Book of Acts, he's open, but what did God tell him to do? He showed him up on the mountaintop, or the roof rather. Hey, all these unclean animals and then rise, kill, and eat. And in that culture, that's like anathema. What? We don't eat that. You cannot eat that. Opening up something as pure as the gospel to the Gentiles, it blew their minds. But God will do that in our own life. So I'll give you a quick example. So in my life, to use the opposite side of alcohol, okay, my dad died early. He died at the age of 45. He struggled with alcohol and amongst other things. And I was resolute. I will never drink alcohol my entire life.
Wow.
And I had my first sip of alcohol was when I was 26 years old. You may see alcohol. This is in my office, but I got a bunch of alcohol back there. You know why? Because I was on a trip that I had won for being the top salesman at Verizon. And God told me as plain as day, I want you to start drinking alcohol because I'm not taking you into the church mountain like I thought. I'm taking you to the business mountain, and you need to be able to understand how alcohol works and handle it well. I'm like,
Wow.
Lord, is that you? Are you sure? Like, is this the devil? And I had to go buy, Mike's Hard Lemonade or something. I didn't know what I was doing. And I had to, again, that is not for everybody. Okay. Please understand.
And extremely uncommon, right? Like,
yes, like God,
go into this area. I mean, it's not wrong. We're on this challenge. We're not drinking alcohol. Yeah. It's not wrong to drink. No. And it really depends on your faith, according to Paul. But in this situation, it's almost like God was saying, hey, look, you don't need to be afraid of this alcohol. Let me show you how it works.
Because of where I'm taking you.
Come on.
Just like Joseph, when he was going to go stand before the king of Egypt, right? Pharaoh. What did he do? He shaved his beard, which you didn't do that in the Jewish culture, right? But he knew, where I'm taking you, shave your beard.
Yeah.
Right? Uncover yourself.
Oh, yeah. That makes me think of like Paul preaching against circumcision, but then when he takes Timothy, he circumcised him because he doesn't want that to be a stumbling block for other people. So interesting, because, you might not drink in front of some people who think that is evil because you're honoring them.
Yes.
God actually called you into different places. Let's drink where people are drinking so that they also can feel comfortable and you can get accustomed to how that works in business.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
It's not forever. I'm just saying I was already resolute. I'll never drink alcohol because of what happened to my dad.
Right.
And I was living it out. Didn't have a drop of alcohol until God said, I actually want you to learn how to drink alcohol because of where I'm taking you.
Wow. And
you just never know.
Yeah. And there's other stories in your life that are just ringing bells for me. And, we don't have the time to get into them, but like just the fact that you thought you were going to die like your dad.
Yeah, that's right.
How you've had to struggle with that. Okay. Let's take it home. Let's bring it home and let's look at the 100X lifestyle. So these are the 3 bullet points in the book about what it might look like. Again, we're after practicality. We want our listeners to actually move into take up your cross today. What does that look like? So here they are. I want you to respond to these, Andrew. So you understand that, like Jesus, following him requires sacrifice to you're sacrificing your rights to benefit others.
Well, yes. I mean, listen, the biggest probably stumbling block and hindrance of you actually fulfilling your assignment is not being surrendered to the absolute fact that you will go through the contradiction, the quote unquote cross, not necessarily death. That's actually easy, but you have a purpose and an assignment. For this reason, the Son of God was manifested to destroy the works of the devil. For this reason, Andrew was manifested to destroy the works of the devil in the insurance world or in the financial world or whatever.
In relationships,
breaking off the patterns in the family, right? Breaking off the addictions, being an example of what's possible in the business world, right?
So you're saying if we expect it, then we can do it better.
That's right. And it only comes through a yielding, a surrender to the prophetic word. What is the prophetic word over your life? And I know for a lot of people, this is kind of a non-starter because they haven't been alone with the Lord long enough to say, God, I'll never forget it. I wrote it down. I have it framed. It's like this little Hilton postcard that I wrote down on the back of like a Hilton napkin or something. And it's framed in my house. Plain as day, I was on my bed like, God, I'm so sick of jumping from job to job. I'm either going to start a camo company because I love to hunt, as you know, or I'm getting into this financial insurance world. Lord, I don't want to be an insurance guy. Like no one on the playground as a kid says, what do you want to do when you get older? I want to be a firefighter, an astronaut. I want to sell insurance. No one says that. But God spoke to me as plain as day when I was asking him, and I wrote it down and framed it. And guess what? He has come through in spite of the contradiction. But if you are not yielded to that prophetic word over your life, what is your assignment? If you're not aligned with your assignment,
there you go.
You're talking,
okay,
bro.
That's really, really good. Okay, so here we go. You believe that following Jesus is to be of service to others.
Yes. Listen, I tell my employees this, you always get paid according to the value that you provide, right? So the more value you get, the more money you're going to make. I look at it like, listen, my goal, my number one job is to obsess over other people's problems. If I obsess about solving their problems, they're going to give me a certificate of appreciation in return, AKA money, right? And the more problems that I solve to serve God's people, and by the way, it's not just in salvation, leading people to the Lord. There is the gift of evangelism. People have that too. But listen, we are called to solve people's problems. And that can be something as practical as fixing their tire. That could be building their home. That could be
loving them out of alcoholism.
Loving them out of alcoholism, right? Whatever you're called to do, solve that problem at the highest level. And God is going to reward you for doing that.
And that's how we become a tool, is we have that orientation of serving others, and then previously knowing that we're going to encounter the works of the enemy, which we endure, and then we destroy them in that way.
One other quick thought.
Yeah.
So we have a job to do, right? For my wife, her job right now, her role that she feels called to, and frankly, probably she feels like, at times it could be the contradiction or the cross, right? Because she's very much entrepreneurial too. But her time that she's going through is raising our kids. She homeschools 4 kids. She takes care of the house. She's got the dominion over the house. And God is bringing her in fulfillment through that situation. Whatever you're called to do, he'll bring you fulfillment and assignment. But the thing is we are called to work. We are his workmanship. When you do not work and whatever you're called to do, serving other people, you get depressed. So if you're depressed, if you're aimless, chances are you're not doing the work that God has called you to do. We were made to work.
Well, and I would say if you're focused on self-fulfillment all the time, from let's take care of me, then that's where that emptiness is, versus where you're saying, like you said, forget exactly the vocabulary, but making it your tenacious, your thing that you're consternated about is solving someone's problem and serving them. That's brilliant. Okay, last one. You cultivate a clear picture of the prize to be won with your sacrifice.
Yeah, so that's where just dreaming with God comes in, because it's like, Lord, there's going to be a payoff. It was for the joy that was set before him that he endured the cross.
Come on.
In his presence is fullness of joy, and the joy of the Lord is your strength. So that joy compelled Jesus to go through the difficulty. There is always a payoff. He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. Reward is half of faith. So, and without faith, it's impossible to please God, right? So if we are, when the Son of Man comes back, will he truly find faith on the earth? If we're called to have faith, then knowing that reward is half of the equation, according to Hebrews 11:6, of faith, there is going to be a reward. There's going to be a payoff.
So good. And in your process, you're 3 before the cross, 3 after.
Yeah.
We have all this kind of more, we're in the gym, it's workout, it's labor intense.
Yeah.
But doing all that with the knowledge for the joy, what you said, for Jesus and his actual cross, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. for the joy set before us, enduring these three things.
Yes.
The joy is the three things on the backside
That's right.
that are going to happen. This miracles, promotion, what was the last one?
And fulfillment.
And fulfillment is going to be on the last time. So what I would recommend to our listeners is that when you're going through the trials, even now in 100X Life Challenge, make sure that you have a clear picture of the goodness that is going to follow. You know, that's either in the physical gym, just getting a picture of the goodness that will follow, the health that will ensue because you're laboring and moving through pain. And then also in relationships, also with calling, also with all these other things. When we're walking with Jesus, when we're following him, we can expect these things, and then we can expect the trial, and we can also expect the glory he will receive on the other side of what may be your cross. Awesome. Andrew, it's so good to be with you. I really, really appreciate it. I feel like we could talk for another 6 hours, as kind of like what we did from Marathon to Midland. Yes.
Yeah.
3 a.m. in the morning yesterday.
Yeah. That was early.
It was early, but thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And we will see you all tomorrow. If you believe in the 100X Life movement, please follow and invite a friend by sharing this podcast. The 100X Life movement can also be found on Instagram and Facebook, and also at 100xlife.com. The 100X Life podcast was produced by Jenna D of Jenna D Services, with music by Ryan Ellis.
Lost, but you found me here, and your fire burns inside. It will not disappear, because the Spirit